The win music is back, and the Vancouver Canucks have won a game for the first time in a while, and it is a good one. It is a 4-2 win over the... Oh, I wasn't muted. Nice. Over the very good Washington Capitals. A 4-2 victory in a game where, you know what, they were getting to must-win territory. This road trip has not been good for the Vancouver Canucks, going 0-3 coming into this game, but they went out. They allowed a goal to the best goal scorer of all time, and they followed it up with Elias Pettersson being a little bit like Elias Pettersson tonight, and I think that's something we can all get behind for the first time in a while. All right, we'll break this game down as we always do. I've got a lot of pluses, a lot of minuses. Look, I got home from hockey and I watched that entire game. Fast forward in the commercials. Took me about 55 minutes to watch it, but we're good. I got so many notes, so much to talk about, and I'm excited to get your feedback and your thoughts and questions on the game as well. So you can get those in now, you can get those in later, do whatever you want. But let's do a quick overview of this game, because for you guys, it's been about an hour and a half since this game ended. So let's go over it. Demko in net back-to-back. They did not go with Spencer Martin, and it seems to have been the right choice. Samsonov in net for the Washington Capitals. We go to the first period, and Tyler Motte, 10 minutes in, takes a delay of game penalty, barely. Like, he is 1 inch into the Canucks zone and puts it over the glass, just barely. A delay of game penalty, but delay of game penalty nonetheless. The Canucks go to the box, and it's Alex Ovechkin just ripping shots from that left point, as he always does, and it works. He beats Thatcher Demko, a missile basically through the 5-hole. Demko can't squeeze fast enough. It's goal, I think, 756 for Ovechkin. His 26th of the year. You can see I put some exclamation marks and question marks next to that. That's crazy. 26th of the year for Alex Ovechkin. Once again, the Canucks are trailing early. They put some pressure on, especially in the final minute. They got about 4 shots. A prime chance for Pederson that gets stopped by a forward. Doesn't go in. 16-11 the shots in the first period for the Vancouver Canucks, who were the better team. Barely. Again, it was a pretty even first period, but they're down a goal just like they have been in every game thus far this road trip. We go to the second period. Canucks starting on the power play, as there was a late penalty in the first period. A pretty messy setup, kind of scrambly. It ends up on the stick of Elias Pettersson. And if you had told me that Elias Pettersson isn't confident right now, but he goes out and he makes the move that he does, where he does that little quick little move inside, he could have just shot it. He could have passed it to someone else, but he makes a little shimmy to the inside and rips it just off the inside of the post. It was a perfect shot. It was vintage Pederson. Love it. Only his 7th of the season on the power play. But the game is tied up. And about 4 minutes later, that line comes on back onto the ice. The Pederson, Höglander, Horvat line. They keep the pressure up. And Elias Pettersson, again, just a cheeky move here. He takes a backhand shot that's pretty easily stopped. The rebound goes into his feet. He kicks up to his stick. At that point, he's behind the net. Samsonov hasn't gotten to his post yet, so he's like, I'll just backhand it at the goalie, and it works. Banks it off the back. Beautiful goal. It is 2-1 Canucks. And the big thing here, and we'll get to it later, look at who's scoring these goals, by the way. It's the players who need to score goals. Washington almost ties it up. It's Sprong getting free about 7 minutes in. He cuts across on Demko. He gets the pad across, does the splits, robs him, clutch save. Another breakaway about 7 minutes later. It's Nick Dowd, the former Vancouver Canuck. You know it's going in because it's a former Canuck, but he loses the handle. It almost gets through Demko. He almost sort of is an accidental Kucherov, but Demko makes the save. And then an absolute mess with under 2 minutes to go in the corner. Hathaway ends up ripping OEL's helmet off. Garnet Hathaway kind of sucks. Like he did that. He had the bad hit on Tyler Motte that was to the head that I didn't like. But he rips OEL's helmet off while Tyler Myers already doesn't have a helmet and he's going to the bench. The Canucks would have been 5-on-3. He tries to fight Chase on. He looks like a silly goose out there. Just looks dumb. He goes to the box. 30 seconds into that power play, the Canucks strike again. Miller finds Horvat in the bumper spot. He fires it through. 3-1 late in the second period. We go to the third. Bad penalty from Tanner Pearson. He just interferes with Tom Wilson. Just got lazy and hit him before he could get to the play. Wilson scores then on a tic-tac-toe. It's a 1-goal game, 3-2. The Capitals take it too many men late. Highmore almost makes it a 2-goal game. They pull the goalie, and a great play by Brock Besser. The net is empty. The Canucks ice it. He wins the race to the puck. He feeds it in front to JT Miller, who taps it in. 4-2 will be your final score. And shout out Tyler Myers for 2 big blocks in the last 20 seconds or so. Okay, let's get to my thoughts on this game. And I feel like the streams that I do like an hour or 2 hours after the game, I knew the result about halfway through. So I already knew the result. So I was focusing more on the game and the players more than the what is happening, like more than who's winning, right? Because I know the result ahead of time. I could be a little more analytical. Let's go over my pluses. First plus, Tyler Myers, the reverse hit on Tom Wilson. Beautiful. I like that this game was a back-to-back for both teams. It wasn't like a scheduled loss, especially on this road trip. It gave the Canucks a fighting chance. Niels Höglander is a hands machine. Garland out of the lineup tonight. We'll get to that a little bit later, but Höglander was spinning. He was like being a little bit like Conor Garland out there, making good moves, playing really, really well. Really liked that from Niels Höglander. The JT Miller, Brock Besser, and Tanner Pearson line brought it tonight. Again, I didn't like the penalty that Pearson took. There's always something in Tanner Pearson's game that I don't like. But the three of them tonight played very, very well. They were just moving out there. They dominated play. I wonder does this show me like player by player if I go Canucks on ice? Let's see what this says for the Miller line. Expected goals. Give me expected goals. 72% for JT Miller, 82% for Tanner Pearson, and 64% for Niels Höglander. It wasn't Höglander, that was Besser with them. Besser was at 85%. So those three on the ice dominated play. They dominated analytically. They played excellent. Elias Pettersson. Look, after every single game, I have come in here and I have tried to defend Elias Pettersson. And as someone who plays hockey at a very low level, at a beer league level, I get into slumps all the time, right? I'll have games where I'll go out there, I'll score 6 goals in 4 games and I'll be feeling great. And then I won't score for 4 weeks, right? And I don't know it on the same level, but I kind of get, how it gets in your head that you're not scoring. You feel bad. You feel like you're letting the team down. And Elias Pettersson played his game tonight. He said after the game, I know what I'm capable of. I love that, right? He's not sulking. He's like, look, I got to be better. I'm going to be better. And he's working harder than anyone else to try to get back to that level. And that's why I haven't been all like, trade Pederson. We got to get rid of this guy. He doesn't care. He got his money. He's cashing out. When we're consistently being told that he's the hardest working guy at practice, that he wants to be better, he seems frustrated about it. He doesn't seem like the kind of person who's just cashing it in. He's in a slump, and it's a long slump. It's not good to be in a 40-game slump. But again, I've always said that I'm not too worried because I think he is skilled enough to get over it. And sure, 1 game does not mean he's over it, right? Sure, he scored 2 goals tonight. That's great. And the 2 goals were both pretty nice. That doesn't mean that he's over it yet. But it is a good sign, and it's something to build off of. And if he can keep this play up over a week, over 2 weeks, and then that turns into a month, then eventually I think he gets back to, even if he doesn't get back to that rookie Pederson level, but if he gets a little bit closer, then I think we'll be pretty happy with that. Thatcher Demko, big plus on the night. Back-to-back games, never easy on a goalie, especially with these times, right? Both games Eastern time, but a 1 p.m. start on a Saturday, a 2 p.m. start on a Sunday. That's tough. I mean, at least you can spend most of like the evening resting yesterday, because he probably knew that he was starting again today. But man, that's not an easy workload, especially going up against 2 really good offensive teams, with Carolina yesterday, with Washington today. But he came through really well. He stopped 6 of 7 Alex Ovechkin shots, which are always scary. Stops 31 of 33 on the night. The power play goes 2 for 4 tonight. That's always good. Nothing to complain about there. I forgot to put power play next to Horvat's goal here on the list here, but the power play looked good. They looked fine. Nothing to complain about there. And then my last thing related to this game is that the Canucks, over the last few games, over the last 4 games, the Canucks were the better team in 3 of them, right? That game against Florida, the thing is, the Canucks were the better team most of the game, and then the chances they gave Florida capitalized on, and it killed them. And it was really the same scenario in Tampa Bay, because you give these guys on Tampa Bay and Florida, these high-flying offensive teams, you give them a chance, and eventually you give them any little bit of rope and they will take it and they will kill you with it. And it was sort of the same thing tonight, right? They played like the better team tonight. We look at these games analytically, right? The game against the Panthers, the Canucks, we're just going expected goals for percentage. It's a stat that I like. 58.6 or 58.7 for the Canucks. Anything above 50 means that you had more expected goals than the other team based on shots, shot location, all that stuff. The game against the Lightning, 54%. The game against Carolina, 49%. So even though they lost that one and they got outplayed, analytically they were pretty close, right? And then we look at today's game, and they were at 61.29%. And the empty netter kind of fudges those numbers a bit. I think if you take the empty netter out, they're a bit closer to like 54% or something around there. But still, at least analytically, they have been the better team for the majority of this road trip, and they're hanging with these teams that are better than them. The thing that's been killing them is special teams, and we'll get to that in the minuses. My last two pluses, Alex Ovechkin gets closer. Look, if the Canucks are going to win this game, I'm glad Ovechkin scored because I want him to get that record. He's at 756 right now, which is awesome. And I watched Spider-Man yesterday and it was good. All right. Minuses. The Canucks allowed the first goal in all 4 games of this road trip so far. We'll see if they can break that against Nashville. You're really not setting yourself up for success though. The other thing I forgot to mention in the pluses, look who's scoring. Pederson, Horvat, and Miller, all top 6 guys. That's big, considering the first 3 games of this road trip, they weren't scoring. I mean, Horvat had the goal against Carolina, but they weren't scoring. It was only the bottom 6 guys in the game against the Panthers, in the game against the Lightning. The top 6 needed to come through, and they did tonight, which was really valuable. Other minus, penalty kill, 0 for 2 tonight. That's not good enough. The Canucks are lucky they only took 2 penalties in reality. I don't think Washington's power play is particularly good this year. I don't think I can pull it up that fast, but I'm going to stall while I attempt to. Where's Washington on this list? Washington is 28th in the league on the power play with just under 16%. A not good power play for Washington, but they come through and they score twice tonight on 2 attempts. And sure, the Canucks penalty kill's bad, and that's what we're talking about here, right? The Canucks penalty kill's at under 68%. They need that to get better. Because it has killed them in these last 4 games. The whole Conor Garland thing is kind of a minus. He had a positive test yesterday morning before the game against Carolina. I think I have this right. He had a positive test either the night before or the morning of the game against Carolina, and then he took another test before the game, tested negative, so he was cleared to play, and then tested positive again after the game, or this morning. I guess it was this morning, which is enough to put him on protocol. So I'm worried we're going to see some more players go on protocol in the next little bit, considering I imagine Garland took warm-ups today. I didn't see it, but I mean, he only got, like, it was right before the game that he was put on protocol, I thought. Worst case, I mean, he was in the dressing room, I'm sure, or hanging with the team at least yesterday. So hopefully we don't see too much spread from that. The other minus, Canucks are 1-3 on this road trip. But the upside of this is if the Canucks can go into Nashville, which isn't an easy team to go up against, right? We are talking about the Nashville Predators, who are second place in the Central Division. If we go by points percentage, they're 3rd behind Minnesota, but they are playing really well. They're 6-2-2 in their last 10. It's a home game for them. They are 11-6 at home. And the Canucks are going to have to go in and battle. If the Canucks win that game, though, this road trip becomes a 2-3 road trip against the best teams in the NHL. Remember, we were talking about this road trip. We talked about it on Canucks After Dark last Monday when we did a preview of this road trip. The Canucks are basically playing 5 of the best 8 teams in the league, right? You could make an argument for 5 of the best 6. You can make an argument for 5 of the best 10. I don't care. Either way, the Canucks had a heater of a road trip. If they go 1-4, that's not good. Right, it takes them way farther the playoff race, even with Calgary and Edmonton floundering. But if they can go out, beat Nashville, make it a 2-3, I think if we had been told, hey, the Canucks are going to go 2-3 against Tampa, Florida, Carolina, Washington, and Nashville, I think we would have taken it. So the Canucks at least have given themselves a chance to do that. All right, that's it for my thoughts. I know I kind of went for a while, but this is the time to answer your questions, bring up your hot takes here live on the air. I still have this poll going. I'll turn that off. The question was Thatcher Demko, and both of the answers were yes. Yes won with 93% of the vote. Let's bring on the old comment machine. Let's pull them up. This is your chance. Ask some questions in the chat if you want your thoughts on the game to be heard, and we'll read them out. Not a lot in here right now, so this is a good chance to get yours in. Steel Dog saying, nice win for the kids. John Pond's line was working hard today. Yes, Juho Lammikko, aka John Pond. That fourth line was really good again, and I don't know why they have been so good lately. But they're contributing offensively. They're shutting things down defensively. I mean, we almost had a Matthew Highmore goal late, which would have sealed it. They've played really, really well. Lee with a good question saying, is there some hope that we'll get the real Pederson back this season? There's always been some hope. And again, you know, my mind sort of goes to William Nylander in this scenario, right? Do you guys remember when Nylander held out in Toronto, got a pretty decent contract, but it wasn't anything crazy, right? You know, like Pederson's isn't like a crazy contract, but he got a nice little pay bump, and he came out and he sucked in Toronto that year. And Toronto Maple Leafs fans, similar to Canucks fans, don't like it when their good players don't play well. And Nylander was really bad for that 1 year, and then he came back the next couple of years, and he has been very, very good ever since. So my thought was always, well, if he sucks this year, at least he can come back next year. And when we have the precedent that really good players can have off years and then bounce back from them, right? It's not a career-ending issue if you have a down year. This game is great, and again, I don't want to put too much stock into one good game from the team and from Elias Pettersson, but I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? All we can do is look at the data we have and the game that we just saw, and we can see, okay, Elias Pettersson looked a little bit better, and he looked quite a bit better. He scored 2 goals, his first multi-goal game in almost a year. Last February was the last time he did that, and that was a great month for the Canucks when they went 2-9-2. So, I mean, we can't complain about this game, right? And hopefully he can keep it up. Magnus saying, apart from the delayed game penalty, Motte has been so good. Yeah, and that, again, that it just goes back to that bottom six. The three of them seem to be working really well together. They're aggressive. They're hard on pucks. They're winning battles. We saw Jason Dickinson getting some chances alongside, and he was playing really well too. All 4 of those guys that are sort of the lower tier of the lineup, the Motte, Highmore, Dickinson, and Lammikko, have really impressed me lately. And we saw Chason get back in the lineup today only because Garland is out. But once Garland comes back, I don't see Chason having a spot. He was okay. I mean, I want to see, did he do anything tonight? He played 8 minutes tonight. He had 2 shots, 2 hits, and a block. Podkolzin only played 7.5. I wonder why that is. Hopefully he can get those numbers back up again. But Boudreau was riding his top guys tonight, right? We have Besser playing over 20, Miller playing over 20, Pederson played 18, and then you have guys like Tyler Motte over 15 minutes, Lammikko over 15 minutes, and Highmore just over 15 minutes as well. All 3 of them getting that ice time. And Boudreau even said yesterday he views them as the third line, right? And that leaves guys like Dickinson, Chason, and Podkolzin as the fourth. Which I don't think we really expected when the season started. Aisha saying that's how we need our top 6 to perform. Absolutely. The top 6 needs to score goals. It's really that simple. And they haven't been doing it lately. And it's really hurt the team alongside of special teams, right? Special teams has been the big issue. But not having scoring from the top 6 really, really hurts, right? I mean, it doesn't help that they're allowing 5, 4, and 4 goals in their 3 previous games. But if the top 6 can score, they definitely be a lot more interesting. Dadman saying Miller, Hughes, Pederson, and Horvat all had a multi-point game. That is true. Quinn Hughes, 2 second assists. So I don't want to put too much stock into that, but it does help his point push. He continues to rack them up. JT Miller just always is putting up points. The empty netter's nice, and he gets the assist on the pass on the Horvat goal, as he's basically the quarterback on the side during those power plays. The Canucks basically have 2 power play quarterbacks out there, which is really, really nice. BL Tubes Great win. Been so frustrating seeing them lose points that they should get while everyone ahead of them are on losing streaks. Got to get 2 from the Preds. Yeah, it does get frustrating, right? Because it's frustrating both ways. If the Canucks had lost those games and Calgary and Edmonton had won, we'd be like, all right, well, it's kind of fallen apart. But now we see that Calgary's losing. Edmonton loses to Ottawa yesterday, and we're thinking, man, like if the Canucks can pull these out, those are big strides, right? These teams in Alberta are opening the door for the Canucks to make a push. The Canucks need to step through that door. They need to go out and they need to win these games. They need to score the goals when they can, and at least they did it tonight, and they need to do it on Tuesday. Clay calling out the 75% Corsi for Miller, Besser, Pearson. Yep, they were really good. They were really, really good tonight. Blitz, the fourth line, has really been a consistent standout throughout this entire road trip. Even when they're not scoring, they've been so fun to watch. Yeah, I agree. I get a little worried that Boudreau's riding them a little hard, right? Normally, if I see, it's technically the third line right now, but you see guys like Highmore and Lamico and Motte. I don't care about Motte. Motte can play 25 minutes a night for all I care. But Highmore and what's his name, Lamico, playing 15 minutes a night, I get a little worried about, but if they're playing this well, you might as well ride them while they're hot. Also, Juho Lamico, 91% in the face-off circle tonight. I don't know what that would be, like 10 for 11 or something along those lines. It doesn't show you the actual numbers, but that's pretty sick. So good on him. Elias Pettersson didn't take a face-off tonight. I guess he was playing on the wing with Horvat, so why would he? But yeah, they have been very, very good. Lee saying Shannon Burroughs is nonstop white knuckles. Yeah, they didn't play a lot tonight. Kyle Burroughs played under 9 minutes. He had that 4-minute penalty. And then Luke Shen played just under 14 minutes. So you can tell he's clearly trying to ride Myers, Hughes, and OEL, right? All three of them right around the 25-minute mark. Yeah, it is a little bit scary with him on the ice. Luke Shen, a +1, though. Can't complain about that. Canuck Clay, what grade would you give Spider-Man? I don't know. I just thought it was good. I enjoyed it. Maybe like an A-. There were some things I didn't love, but they did a lot of fan service that I really liked. No spoilers, but I really enjoyed, some of the callbacks. Yashu, is today a dead cat bounce or sustainable moving forward? I've never heard that term, but I kind of like it. It's tough, right? You look at how the team has differentiated their play since Bruce Boudreau coming in and since the mass exodus of December 4th, or December 5th, December 6th. It was one of those days. I think it was the 5th. And you look at if you just look in the win column, you're like, man, the Canucks have won. They went 8-1-1. That's not sustainable. But the way they're playing is. And we can say, okay, well, they lost to 3 really good teams and they happened to beat one good one, right? And they lost fairly handily to Florida and Tampa and Carolina, right? All those, I think, were 3-goal games. The Lightning was a 2-goal game, but nonetheless. But then you look at the way they're playing, right? You look at the analytics, and the analytics show, expected goals wise in their last bunch of games, they're on the positive side of history for all of those, except for the Kings game. The Kings game, they got crushed, that they lost 2-1. But for most of them, they're on the positive side of that. Their play style, they look like an entirely different team from what they did a month and a half ago. So I don't know if beating teams like Washington and beating these sort of top 5, top 8 teams is that sustainable. But I think they can use this and their play style against worse teams, right? Because remember, you play half of your games against bottom half of the league teams, right? Especially with how not great the Pacific Division is looking right now. If you can carry some momentum from this into your games against the Edmonton Oilers, the Calgary Flames, right? Those are the big games that you need to win. And they face both of them in a couple of weeks here, right? They play the Oilers on the 25th in just 9 days. They play the Flames on the 29th. So those are big ones. And if they can carry this momentum against those teams, that's the big thing there. Aisha saying a minus has to be how many teams are still between us and wildcard number 2. Oh yeah, it's an uphill battle. It is an uphill battle because you can look at it and you can say, oh, well, they're only 5 points out. Well, they're 5 points out, but they also they still have to leapfrog Edmonton, Calgary, and San Jose to get to there, right? And Winnipeg and Dallas, I guess, at this point. It's not a walk in the park. There's a lot of teams they have to do, but all they can do is beat the teams in front of them. And if they can get those wins, they'll at least have a shot. Woo! That was a good one. A good sneeze. Mark King, will the Canucks make a splash in trades? And if yes, when, and why not if no? I think Jim Rutherford is going to be pretty heavy on the sell train, especially if the Canucks don't make another big push, right? They made that big push to go from 7 games below 500 back to 500. Now they're just 1 game back. But if they don't make another push by the trade deadline is not till middle of March, by the way. I think it's like March 22nd. If the Canucks aren't in a playoff spot by then I think around trade deadline, we have a lot of moves made, right? If the Canucks are still 3 or 4 points out of the playoffs right at the trade deadline, there's probably only like 10, 15 games left in the season. Then I see some moves being made, some pieces being shipped out. I think if the Canucks are in a playoff spot, maybe around, but I think if they're hanging on to wild card 2, but they're not looking great around the trade deadline, I think that same thing happens. But if the Canucks have moved up, maybe they're in the top wild card spot, or maybe they're just on a bit of a heater around the trade deadline, then maybe a few less moves get made. But I don't think the Canucks are really in a hurry here, unless it's around someone like Halak, who if he plays 2 more games, then he gets that big bonus next year. But I mean, why? I don't think you need to trade anyone today or tomorrow. I don't think you need to trade anyone in the next 3 weeks. I think you can probably wait until, that middle of March, maybe a week before the trade deadline, and start to look at it that way. Unless you think you can get more value for some of these guys by giving them more games with that other team. Canuck Carl saying, not hockey related, who does your win music? The song is called Lounge by Erling, Ehrling. It's just a good song. So I just throw it on here, and it doesn't have copyright on it. So I can do that. And it's fun. Dabnad said, I've learned that I haven't got a prediction in a long time, so I always predict the Canucks lose. It worked for today's game. Yeah, see, this is called the emotional hedge. When you bet, you hedge your bets, and you bet against the team you like. I do this all the time. I pretty consistently put $3 or $4 on whoever the Canucks are playing against, or who the Seahawks are playing against if I'm watching football, or just the team I don't want to win, because that way if they lose, I made a couple bucks at least, right? So it's a pretty good way to live. Kai saying, I've always been fine with the Canucks left side on defense, especially if Rathbone is called up soon, but I really think the Canucks should consider trading a top 6 forward for a young right-handed D. This is a great thought in theory. The problem is a young right-handed D, there are 31 other teams in the NHL that are looking for those. Genuinely, every single team in the NHL would love a young right-handed defenseman. So you're going to have to give up a lot to get him, right? Tanner Pearson's not getting you a young, guy who's going to potentially be top 4 one day, right-handed defenseman. It's just not going to happen. So you got to be prepared to really give up a good player, right? You're probably looking at, maybe a JT Miller if you're trying to make a swing that big. And even then, it might take a little bit more to grease the wheels on something like that. But yeah, the Canucks right-handed side on defense is pretty bleak, and they could definitely use some help. Mark is calling out that OEL finally got a point. Has he not been getting points lately? I haven't really been following that, but yeah, he does get the assist on the second Pederson goal. Quattrob saying, although the top 6 had a good game, this is just one game. They've struggled with consistently the whole season. I'm not going to get too excited, but we'll credit them when it's due. Yeah, I think this is the fair way to live this entire season, right? The Canucks have been very streaky. The hope is that this is a part of a positive streak. If not, it's a little scary. Victoria, thoughts on the all-star rosters? I think they're fine. Lots of people are talking about like, oh, this person gets snubbed, this person gets snubbed. Kadri's the obvious one, right? Quinn Hughes, you could talk about. JT Miller would have a decent chance, but you look at they only bring like 10 guys now, right? From each division. They don't bring full teams because it's 3-on-3. So there's just not a lot of room. And especially since they bring one guy from each team, I mean, the most a team can really have is 2, and only a couple of teams can do that. I don't love the whole participation idea of it, right? I don't know if Arizona needs to be sending someone to the All-Star game. But that's kind of it on that. Roadster, do you think Pederson ever gets back to playing center? I'm starting to think that given his terrible face-off ability, that wing might be the better position for him. Yeah, he's not good at face-offs, and that's a big issue. We've seen games where he was like 1 for 11, right? He's like 1 for 14. He had the one game where he was 7% in the face-off circle a couple of weeks ago. The thing is, the Canucks do have a lot of centers, right? They have Horvat who can play center. They have Miller who can play center. And that's your top 6, right? So if you're going to put Pederson at center, then you're moving one of them to the wing likely anyways. So you have the luxury of having a few very good centers that you can move Pederson over to the wing. I still like the way Pederson plays as a center, though, just not looking at faceoffs. So I wouldn't hate the idea of, having... like if he's playing with Horvat, having Horvat take the draw but play wing, and then Pederson just plays as the center, because the person who takes the faceoff doesn't have to be the centerman. The problem is that if you put someone else in there, they're probably not very good either, and I don't know, it's kind of tricky. I also don't put a ton of stock into faceoffs that often. I think the team that wins more faceoffs doesn't always win the game, right? I'm the same with hits, right? People are like, the team that gets more hits is the better team, and they're hurting the other team and making them not want to play the game. It's like, if you look at I don't think there's probably much correlation between number of hits and number of wins, generally. And I think faceoffs kind of falls in a similar regard, but if you don't have the puck, I guess you can't score. So it kind of goes both ways. Magnus saying, the hockey guy was just chatting about how he thinks Miller's the one we'll trade. Do you think it's better to move a top piece for future or keep what we have together? It's really tough because JT Miller is one of the best players on this team, and it's not that close. What you really have to prioritize is window, right? Because the goal isn't to make the playoffs. The goal is to win a Stanley Cup. So if you think that this team is maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years away from being a contender, well, then you're talking about a JT Miller who's maybe 30, 31, and who's making a lot more money than he is right now, taking up a lot more cap space. Now, I don't hate that idea because I think a 31-year-old JT Miller is probably a really valuable piece on a contending team. But how do you get to that contending team status? Well, you need really good guys on cheap contracts, and you need just a lot of really good players, right? And the Canucks have lots of those really good players. But how do you get more of those? Well, you could trade a guy like JT Miller and maybe pick up a really good piece on the back end, or someone younger that's going to slot in, maybe eventually turn into someone who can fill that role, that hole that gets left open. It's really tricky because JT Miller is going to have a lot of value, right? By the trade deadline, JT Miller could very reasonably be around, the top 10 in NHL scoring. Let's say top 20 in NHL scoring with 1 year left on his contract that's really cheap for next year. So it's basically a 2-year rental for a contending team to go pick him up. That's a lot of value that they're getting. And I think he's going to be a really valuable piece on the market that you could really get a lot for. So it's tricky. It's genuinely tricky. I don't want to see JT Miller traded. But I also don't want to see him leave as a free agent at the end of next season because the Canucks can't afford him, and then they get nothing for him anyways. So it's there's pros and cons. Of course, it's a tricky decision, and it's gladly one that I don't have to make. All right, let's take the last couple of here. Ryan, do you think the Canucks make the playoffs? All right, big question. Especially as a wild card, was their start to the season too bad? Something that's ruled them out as playoff contenders for the season. If we're talking about making the playoffs, I think they're probably around a 10% chance, right? And I don't think that's too unreasonable. They have a lot of teams to get past, right? Again, like I said earlier, sure, they're 5 points out of it, but there's also like 5 teams in their way. And if we look at this and we say, okay, let's say Vegas and LA are going to make it from the Pacific. And honestly, I might throw Calgary in there. They're on a bad run right now, but I think they pick it back up. So let's say Vegas, LA, and Calgary make it in from the Pacific. And in the Central, you have Colorado, Nashville, St. Louis, and Minnesota is going to make the playoffs most likely as well there. Well, that leaves one wild card spot. That leaves wild card 2. And the teams competing for that spot are the Winnipeg Jets, the Dallas Stars, the Anaheim Ducks, the San Jose Sharks, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Vancouver Canucks. What's that, 6 or 7 teams that all have a reasonable shot at that one playoff spot? Well, you got to be the one to take it, which means you have to win a lot of games here on out, which makes the odds very low. Do I think they can do it? Sure, they could. I don't think the odds are in their favor, but I think it is possible. Lee says, if I miss a game and they lose, I'm happy I didn't waste my time. If I miss a game and they win, I'm happy and I enjoy the game highlights. So you should just never watch a game. Yeah, it's very common that people, if the Canucks lose, they try to forget about it, right? I mean, you can look at, some of my past live streams, viewership numbers. This one's kind of an anomaly. It's late, well after the game, and it's a Sunday afternoon. There's football on. So I wasn't expecting view count to be very high here. But you look at some of my previous streams, like the game against LA that the Canucks lost. I had a total of about 1,300 views for that one. Well, 2 weeks before that, the Canucks beat the Blue Jackets in that big game where they came down from 3-0. That game had 6,000 views, right? So you look at, it's just whether or not people care, right? 2 days after that Kings game, I got double the viewership in the game that the Canucks beat the Kraken. And I'm the same way. After the Canucks lose, before I was doing this, I would log off of Twitter. I just would be like, all right, I'm just going to forget about this because otherwise I'm just going to be grumpy all night. There's no benefit to me just thinking about the team, doing some analysis or whatever. And now I'm a little bit past that, where if the Canucks lose, I focus more on this than I do the game, and I'm a little bit happier. But yeah, most people are the same way, right? If the team doesn't do well, why bother? Why waste your time with stuff afterwards? So I think you are in the majority there. So how you doing? Say it's probably 3 years till we make the playoffs. Hamonic contract only has played 9 games this year. Who knows about next year? Yeah, look, Hamonic had the whole, vaccine, what's the word I'm looking for? Snafu, early in the season. And then he got hurt, which is unfortunate. I don't think he's been playing that well when he's in the lineup. But he will be a good piece to at least get back. I didn't like that contract from the start. I'll tell you that. It's not 3 years, is it? Am I going crazy? I thought it was 2 by 3. Yeah, it's 2 years at $3 million. So he's only got next year left on that. But yeah, that could be a really big waste of cap space. At least this year, right? You could have had someone else in the lineup making $3 million. They would have been a lot better of a contributor. But when part of it comes down to injury, I mean, there's not much we can do about that, right? It's basically random chance whether people get injured or not. Last couple we'll take here. Elias Weed saying, IMO, Miller doesn't fit our window of contending. I think you trade Miller for pieces that can grow into a player that he is right now. That maybe includes John Marino in Pittsburgh. Interesting thought. I haven't done too much research on John Marino, but I'll pull up his page. He's 24. 24 is a good age to pick up. And yeah, he could be a really good piece. He's already making $4.4 million for the next 5 years or so. But this could be a guy that you target. However, wow, he was born a couple days before me. However, you look at a team like Pittsburgh, and sure, Pittsburgh might be thinking we go all in again, but they're kind of just hanging around a playoff spot. They need to rebuild the covers at some point because they have no one coming up. John Marino is probably a really valuable part of their team, right? Are they willing to give that up for a JT Miller? That depends. Kai saying, if you're the GM, what would you do with Tyler Motte? I always appreciate players who are elite in their role, and he's a huge piece in our bottom 6. But if you can get a second rounder, I don't know how you can decline. I fully agree. I think we talked about this on Canucks After Dark a couple of weeks ago. Tyler Motte's a tricky one because he is a big heart piece on this team. I think he likes being here. I think the rest of the team loves having him on the team. I mean, how could you not? A guy that works that hard and plays as well as he does. He's a very valuable piece. However, if a contending team comes out and says, hey, we'll give you a second round pick for Tyler Motte. I mean, they got Tyler Motte for Vanek, right? That was the Vanek trade. They got Jokinen and Motte back. And that eventually turns into a second rounder after you get a few really good years of Motte. I think that's really valuable. And we can talk about, then they can just re-sign Motte after the offseason. That never happens though, right? Like, it's so rare. We think about it all the time. We're like, oh yeah, trade all of your guys on expiring contracts and tell them to come back next year. But you think Tyler Motte's going to go into, let's say they trade him to a team like, I don't know, Pittsburgh or Florida even, and he has a lot of success and he goes to like the third round of the playoffs. You think he's going to want to come back here? Right? You see sort of the grass is greener sort of scenario. He goes over there. Maybe he wins a Stanley Cup. He's loving life. He's partying. He's on a winning team. He might not want to come back here. Right? So I would not be surprised if they can get some value from Tyler Motte. I think you take it. And I again, I love him, but eventually you're going to have to make some moves at some point, especially if they're out of the playoff hunt in the next 2 months or so. We'll wrap up by saying hello to Zachary from Toronto. Thank you for tuning in. And with that, we are going to wrap up. Thank you guys very much for joining. Also, Fangirl renewing as a VIP, saying you got lucky today and predicted P will score. VIPs don't show up in my chat machine that I use, but I do appreciate it. Thank you very much. I wonder, can I do this? Does this work? Now that I'm using this software, it doesn't. But thank you very much. Yeah, we're going to wrap up there. If you missed any part of it, you can go back to the beginning here on YouTube. It'll also be up on your favorite podcast platform shortly. Just search Parker's Pucks. You guys know the drill at this point. We'll be back Canucks After Dark tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Pacific on the Canucks After Dark channel, link down below. And the Canucks take on the Nashville Predators on Tuesday. I think the game's probably at 5, right? It's at 5 o'clock because in Nashville. So that will be one we'll cover. We'll be live at around 7:30, 8 o'clock for that one. So I will see you then. Have a good one. Talk to you later.